This is my third attempt at this one. I'm just double checking on all the settings that I've been putting in here, making sure I'm putting in the right settings. The other time when I tried to do a live stream from my phone, I had it set to for kids, and people weren't able to chat. So I just want to make sure that I did it properly here. Um, and yeah, I'm aware that the Intellivision Gamer, who probably has a lot of the people that watch my show too, is already doing his live show. So I don't know if anybody's going to show up to this, but anyways, yeah, I just wanted to do a kind of a chat on what your first console was, and I can't remember why this came to my mind. I think I was watching somebody else's video, or I saw a comment. Maybe I saw a comment on Facebook. I'm all over the place when it comes to this stuff. And, somebody was like, oh, Intellivision was my first console, and this and this and this. And so I thought it would be fun to kind of do a little, kind of an open video, like a chat. Hey, it's John Rogers. You went live just as I was looking for something to do. Amused one. Oh crap! You know what? On the phone, the things disappear so fast. I have to pay attention because I don't know if I can pull that back up. Really have to pay attention. I think what I'm gonna have to do is have like a separate. When I do this, I have to have a. Hey, John Rogers saying the Coleco. I have to have like a separate computer or something set up so I can see the actual comments and respond to them. Because on the phone they pop up for a few seconds and then they just disappear. I don't know where the heck they go. I don't know how I can see the freaking comments. Oh, there's an icon here. I don't know what that is. Live chat, super chat. All messages are visible. Huh. All right. That's interesting. But yeah. Anyways, yeah, the ColecoVision is an interesting console. I didn't know a whole lot of people. Yeah, I'm used one. It'll take a bit, but I'm sure you'll get it, man. Yeah, basically, I gotta be quick when the comment comes up. I have to read it, or else it's gonna disappear. But yeah, the ColecoVision. I knew a few people who had one, and it's interesting how on my street, anyways, my block where I grew up, I knew who had the Atari, who had the ColecoVision, who had the the Commodore 64, who had the VIC 20. It was interesting. It was a diverse time. Not many friends had multiple systems at the time. It was like typically that friend down the street has a VIC 20. My friend over there has a Commodore 64. My neighbor next door, had also had a Commodore 64. Coleco Telstar, 1977. Interesting. Um, and you just kind of always knew. Like I knew somebody who had an Atari 2600. Actually, I knew two people. There was one neighbor I remember. She had both an Atari 2600 and a ColecoVision, I believe. I think. I know she had a 2600 because I remember borrowing it once. But I think she also had a ColecoVision. Our Coleco went down after one of our dogs chewed through the power cables. Oh no! That's awful. I'm pretty sure she did have a ColecoVision as well. Playing Solus on the C64 every mini now and again right now. Man, I missed out having one of those when I was young. And, there was some... Oh, Atari Creep. I had a buddy that had a 2600, a ColecoVision, an Atom computer, and a SMS. Wow. That must have been your rich friend. I mean, my friend that I grew up with, he had... one of my friends, he had a Coleco Atom as well. And I always think it's funny because his name was Adam, or is Adam. So it was funny that he had this like ColecoVision Adam named after himself almost. And I think he borrowed some of the other stuff like the steering wheel and the Turbo game he borrowed from the other neighbor that I was talking about earlier that had a 2600 and a ColecoVision. And I know she had a 2600 because when she went on vacation, I borrowed her Atari 2600, the VCS at the time, and all the games. And so she went on vacation. I borrowed her Atari, and I had that for like I guess almost a week. I guess I don't remember exactly how long they were gone for, but I had her Atari because I grew up with the Intellivision, and that was my first real introduction to video games. I mean, I was probably I don't know six, seven, somewhere in there when we had our Intellivision, and I didn't really, video games were a kind of a new concept to a lot of people at that time. Um, the blocky graphics and everything was normal to us. We had arcades that had games like Donkey Kong and Pac-Man and Q*bert and all those classics. But having a console at home, it wasn't it wasn't very commonplace to everybody. No Atari creep Atari is. So and what was interesting, like I was saying, is the diversity of it all. Like everybody had a different console. You kind of knew who had the different console. You would go over to so and so's house. My neighbor next door, the people that I was friends with all my life, they had they started off also with the Commodore 64 when I had one. So we both had a Commodore 64. They never had the Intellivision. They used to come over to my house to play Intellivision. We played boxing all the time, and a few other two-player games we'd play together. But then we both got the Commodore 64. And if you're familiar with that machine, it is a computer, but most people used it for gaming. I would say a big chunk of Commodore 64 users used it for gaming. Yes, you could program on it, which I did. I dabbled in at the time. I tried to understand basic programming, but you could do like a few work stuff on there. But let's be real, most people were gaming on the Commodore and sharing games, which was a big thing, which today we would just simply call pirating. I mean, it was like it was commonplace. Let me illustrate to you the disc holder where we had our discs, all our discs, and we would send lists to each other of all the games we had, and then we had a special software which would copy discs and just freely share them amongst the community, and that was a very normal thing. And my friend next door, we would share games all the time. I had my contacts, he had his contacts. Actually, he ended up buying more games than I did. I mean, his family was able to afford to buy all the games that came out. I remember he had like a lot of the new stuff. Like he had Rambo and RoboCop and Batman and all these games that came out. His parents went and bought them for him, and I would, go over to his house and play them, or he would bring it over to my house. Bring the hey, Mike's Gaming Gala. He would bring the disc over to my house, and we would play at my house, and then sometimes we would be able to copy. In fact, if you've seen this game, Rags to Riches, which is a game that I ported from the Commodore 64, it was my friend next door that I remember playing this game a lot with. And in fact, if you see my game, if you've bought the ROM off me, or if you have the cartridge and you boot it up, you'll see I actually left it in memory of him because he recently passed away during a scuba diving accident, of all things, on vacation, which really sucked. But yeah, I mean, when I found out he passed, and it was one of those things, and I was just like, I was in the middle of closing out that game, finalizing it, and I thought that would be a cool thing to make a memory of him at the title screen, because often when I do think of those games, and I do think a lot of the old Commodore 64 games, I do remember my friend Ian. Like RoboCop and Rambo and Ghostbusters and Impossible Mission, we played them all together on the Commodore 64. And as much as the Intellivision was my first console, my first system, um, I think I have a heck of a lot more memories of Commodore 64. Only because it had almost like endless games, endless types of games. Like the Intellivision had its fair share of great titles for two-player. Like I said earlier, boxing was, we played that a whole lot. I remember we would all fight over who would be the certain colors. Like, if you played boxing on the Intellivision, it was like you had blue, red, green, tan, which we all called gold at the time. And we always knew that the gold fighter was the best fighter. I think it explains it in the manual. It probably tells you the dexterity or whatever of the fighters. But we used to always fight over who would be the gold fighter, because most of the time that gold fighter would be the winner. Kind of interesting. But we played a whole lot of stuff on Commodore 64. So, yeah, the Intellivision was my first console, my first actual introduction to gaming. But then the Commodore 64 became my my full knowledge of all the classic arcade games. In fact, a lot of the games that I'm familiar with that originated on the Atari 2600, I learned from the Commodore 64. Games like Hero, I didn't know that was a Commodore 64 game. River Raid, I didn't know that was a Commodore 64 game. It was interesting that when I started to really dive into the Atari 2600 and I started to learn all the titles that existed, I said to myself, I'm like, I can't believe that game existed or began on that system, on something that I always looked at as being primitive, but really isn't. I mean, if you look at what it can do, if you look at all of the diversity of games, the Atari 2600 did a lot. Telegames Heavy 6. So the Atari Creep was saying that the Telegames Heavy 6, there's so many different, well, the Atari itself, I mean, a lot of people have memories of all different types of Ataris too, right? You could have been like one of the original Atari people, the VCS, the Heavy Sixer, the Light Sixer, the Vader. For me, it was the Junior, the Atari Junior, which came out much later. Came out 89, I think, 89, 90, somewhere in there. Back when they thought, hey, even though Nintendo is running supreme, Atari was like, hey, we still exist. Let's build an affordable console that we can market and sell. I think it went for like $50. Oh, Mike's Gaming Gala had a late sixer. That's nice. I think it went for like $50 or $49. That was like the whole catch of it. Came in a nice box. I was stupid enough to throw mine away when I was cleaning one time. But yeah, I had a nice little box, nice little rectangular box. Had Atari 2600 on it. Had the Junior picture on it. Came with a single joystick, I believe. Yeah, I think it came with a joystick, and that was it. No game. You had to buy the games. If you wanted a game, you had to buy it, which was fine. I ended up buying with my Atari. I bought Keystone Capers and Midnight Magic, and it was Keystone Capers that made me, like, when I saw that box in the store, for some reason I wanted that game, and at the time I didn't have the Atari, so I think that's what fueled me to say I want an Atari 2600 was the Keystone Capers game. And I ended up getting that because, I had my Commodore 64 and I had all my games for it, but at some point the games kind of stopped. Like I just had what I had and that was it. I wasn't typically going out and buying new games for it. But when the Atari 2600 Junior came onto the shelves and they were advertising it as like an affordable thing, and I believe at that time I didn't even have my Nintendo yet. It was in between that period before I had my NES, which I wanted. You know, obviously, I think every kid at that time, you know, wanted an NES. I didn't get one when it first came out. My friend had one. That's how I learned about it. That was probably like 86, 87, I think, when I went to his house. My other friend, a friend that I grew up with, and he introduced me to his Nintendo, and that's when I first saw Super Mario Brothers, and I was blown away. I was like, "Holy crap, that looks like a lot of fun!" And he had Zelda, which, for whatever reason, he was so like protective of. He almost didn't let me play it. He was like, "You can't play this." Like like he treated it like it was like this grail of some sort. He's like, you know, be careful with the Zelda game. Uh, so I was just like, yeah. Um, I didn't really get to play Zelda. I watched him play it for like a few minutes, and I was like, wow, like look at that game. But when I finally got around to getting a Nintendo NES, it was definitely after the Atari. I'm pretty certain it was after the Atari that I got one. It's hard to remember now. Going back so far, my brain is all, you know, so much went on during the 90s, the 80s and 90s, and it's just like, I'm pretty certain I had to, like, you know, like I do remember when I got my Nintendo, and that was pretty cool. Like, it was like my father and we just went into the store, went into like, I think it was Eaton's. It was a store. It was a department store called Eaton's in Canada. I don't know if that was ever in America. I think it was a Canadian thing, but they had the action set that came with the guns. It came with the gun, the Zap gun, and Mario Brothers and Duck Hunt. And I pointed out, I'm like, that's what I want. I want to get that. And my father's just like, okay, picked it up, and I'm like, seriously? Like, okay, and he just bought it for me. I was like, wow, like. And those are the memories that stick with you, and that's my favorite thing about video games is the memories. Hey, the No Swear Gamer. My first console was a used Magnavox Odyssey 2. Nice. The Odyssey 2 is another console. I actually have one over there right now. I haven't spent a whole lot of time with it. I did a few videos when I first got it. But it's an interesting console, and I can see how a lot of people would have been, you know, pretty much amazed by it when it came out. It does like it's a good precursor to the systems like the Intellivision and the ColecoVision, where it was just starting to do exactly what we wanted it to do. Yeah, obviously the color range on them was pretty limited. It's the blockiest of blocky, but still, it's a console that really tried to do what we wanted it to do. And like I've seen a few of the games. I did a few videos on some of the games. I think I still have, I don't know, I got a couple of carts over there that I still haven't really tried. Although I did find out that some of them do require, I think someone said it requires some voice module or something, or I'm not sure. I don't have any manuals. At least I don't think I have many manuals with it. My actually the guy that bought my DeLorean, he's the one that gave it to me. It was his wife's console when she was a kid. And it was in her basement, and I guess they saw it, or he saw it when they were cleaning up, and she's like, yeah, I got this old video game console, and he's like, oh, I know a guy who likes old video games. So he called me up and he's like, would you like it? I'm like, sure. So when I after I sold him my DeLorean, he showed up with it in his hands. He's like, here you go, man. I'm like, cool. Yeah, Pickaxe Pete, Casey Munchkin. I got the Pickaxe Pete game. I don't have the Casey Munchkin. And the Killer Bees game I hear is really good too, but I don't have that one. I think I saw a listing for it somewhere. Somebody was asking quite a lot of money for it, so I'm like, no. Yeah, some of the library is pretty rough. I can imagine that. I mean, it's it's one of the earlier, I guess it's considered a second gen console. Most voice games on the O2 will work without the voice. You just won't hear the voice. Yeah. Which is, I guess, similar to some of the games on the IntelliVoice, but depending on if the voice is critical to play the game or not, kind of like Bomb Squad or whatever, you need to hear the voice. You need to know what they're asking because it might not say it on the screen. Actually, I remember having that conversation about the IntelliVoice on whether if a game requires the IntelliVoice, if it should absolutely need it to play the game, or if it's just a nice have feature. Much like the Ghostbusters Ultimate Edition for the Intellivision, if you don't have the voice, it's okay. You still play the game. It's not going to matter. But games like Bomb Squad, where you kind of need to hear what the person says, even where is it? This game that I started working on a while back. There's a box for it, Space Taxi for the Intellivision. I started working on this game, and I added voice in there, but at the same time, so the voice, what it tells you is when the dude gets into the taxi, he's supposed to tell you which pad he wants to go to. And so I ended up creating a spot on the board that puts a number so you know what pad it is. So if you don't have the IntelliVoice hooked up, no problem. You'll know where you have to go. And it does it also on the Commodore 64, which is the only one that I've played when I was a kid, was Space Taxi on the Commodore 64. And it did the same thing. It had it at the bottom of the screen, and it would say which pad. It would be like pad 6 please, or pad 2 please, or up please. So if you didn't have your voice on, your volume on, or your IntelliVoice or whatever, you could still play the game, which I think they should do. I mean, to make the voice mandatory that you have to have it, it just kind of ruins it. But I don't know. That's what I was told for the I guess whatever Odyssey game I had. Like today, there's so many options and so many different games now that can utilize the IntelliVoice or utilize voice. I even added voice into this game, which it wasn't really necessary. In fact, I only did it because when I was learning to program, using Oscar's book, the in programming games for the Intellivision, there's a section on how to utilize IntelliVoice. And I started reading it, and I'm like, oh, that's cool. And at the time I was making Keystone Cops, I'd like, let's try it out. So I'm like, what kind of voices could I throw in here? And so, I'm using the robotic voice, which is the basic voice that you get out of the IntelliVoice, not the fancy voices that you can actually use if you have the technology to do it. So it's a little bit hard to understand what he says. I mean, I tried to use words like stop police. What else did I say? He's getting away. Darn it. I tried to do words like that just to make the game, just kind of add that little bit of extra. It didn't really need the IntelliVoice. You don't need it to play the game if you play it without. However, the one thing that I learned afterwards was because I was using those as a kind of a sound effect in a way, that if the cop hits an obstacle, like when he's running and he hits something like the jewelry counter or radio or whatever it is. I always call it a jewelry counter. It's actually a radio. It looks like a jewelry counter to me. The radio, or he hits an object, he yells something out like ouch, or he's getting away, or something like that. But what I didn't account for is if you don't have your IntelliVoice in, then no sound happens. So I kind of lost that effect, and I think there's a way to do it. Um, now that now I've learned a lot more programming for the Intellivision. I think there's a way to detect if the IntelliVoice is saying anything, and if it's not, to create a sound effect instead, or maybe have both happen at the same time. I don't know. But right now, if you hit if you hit an object and you don't have your IntelliVoice in, nothing happens. There's no sound. There's nothing. It just hits the thing, and that's the end of it. So I guess that's just a fun little tidbit of programming for the Intellivision, having that IntelliVoice. But like I said, going back on topic here, yeah, the Intellivision was my first system. I was, I think, I must have been between 6 and 8. I would have to ask my mom, because, like, how old was I when we got that? Because I do remember her telling me a few times that, like, my parents had to save up quite a bit of money, because at that time, Intellivision was quite expensive. It was the more expensive of the options available of the time. The Atari came in a little bit cheaper. And I'm not sure why they went with Intellivision. My guess is my uncle had one, so maybe they spoke to him. Maybe or more my brother saw the ads for it and wanted it, or I know his friend had one. So I'm not 100% sure as to why we went that route. But I do remember when we got our Commodore 64, and my mom was always like, she wanted to stay on top of the latest trend or technology. She knew that it would be important. She knew that computers were going to be a thing. In fact, she even got into that when she was younger. That was one of her first real official career jobs, was working with the old computers, the mainframes. And so she knew that technology, the computer technology, was important, and that it would benefit us to have something like the Commodore 64 or something newer, some kind of technology that's coming out. So she knew that that was important, and yeah, it was expensive, but when you're talking about your kids, it's worth it to invest the extra money if you think that it's going to benefit them, right? Like, I get it. Some people were like, "Yeah, too expensive. We can't afford it," and that's fine. I mean, um, like the Atari 2600 was still a great system. You had a lot more choices. You had a lot more games. You had a lot more options, and I do remember a lot of my friends having them. And there were certain games that the Atari had that the Intellivision didn't have, and I always wanted to play. So, and it's the same thing with the ColecoVision. I remember always wanting the ColecoVision because I knew a friend that had it, and I went over to her house. I actually had a bunch of friends that had the ColecoVision. I remember going over to their house and playing games like Smurf Rescue at Gargamel Castle, and actually my first go at ET was on a ColecoVision using the Atari expansion module, which allowed her to play Atari games on the ColecoVision. I don't think I fully understood that at the time. I just knew I was playing on a ColecoVision, but obviously it was that because, to my knowledge, that game was never officially released on a ColecoVision. The ET game for the Atari. And I thought they were great games. I thought ET was amazing. I kind of was disappointed that it didn't exist on the Intellivision because I wanted to play it. Of course, today it does through the magic of Homebrew. You can actually buy ET for the Intellivision. Um, if it's for sale, I'm not actually certain if it's still a title you can buy today, or if you have to buy one that's used and being sold, resold at a profitable price. I don't know if it's one of those, and that's a whole other conversation to get into about homebrews and availability of homebrews. But yeah, ET did. It was for sale quite a while ago, and yeah, I mean it's pretty much the same as the Atari. Got me. Oh, Mr. Postal, my first was a Switch 2600 Woody. I enjoy them all now. That's cool. Yeah, the four switch. I had one of those for a little bit, but it never worked. I think I had it work like once. I plugged it in and tried it, and it worked. My friend actually gave it to me. He gave me his Atari 2600 four switch and his Coleco Gemini, and neither one of them worked. But he gave me a bunch of games with it and the controllers. And I tried really hard to get the four switch to work, and I couldn't do it. For some reason, I don't think I tried so much on the Gemini. I think I plugged a game in, or I turned it on and I got no signal, and I figured it was toast, and I got rid of it. I threw it out. And after a while, I kind of realized, I didn't even try to clean it. Like, maybe if I tried cleaning it with some contact cleaner, with some compressed air or whatever, cleaning the games, maybe it really would have worked. But at that time, I didn't really know too much about how to deal with the consoles and all that stuff. So I think I kind of threw it out hastily, thinking it was garbage. But I kept the controllers because I thought it was cool. They have the little spinner on the bottom. But I had the Atari 4 switch, and yeah, I tried taking it apart. I tried cleaning the inside. Tried to, get in there with the alcohol. Tried to resolder. I tried a bunch of things. Nothing worked. And to my knowledge and capacity, anyways, of what I know. So I ended up trading it off to somebody in the Atari group. That and a whole bunch of other games, Intellivision games, Atari games, extras that I had, like duplicates for my light Sixer, which works today. It still works fine. So yeah, I just wanted to have a wood grain because I had my Atari Junior for so long. I started with the Atari Junior, and I just wanted to have an authentic wood grain. Looks more impressive. Of course, I also have the Atari 7800, which I can play Atari 2600 games on as well, so that's always an option. Of course, like games like this one, the Mr. Run and Jump, came out alongside with the Atari 2600 Plus, which I think is quite interesting and a great option for those who want to, I guess, relive their past without having to buy this old stuff. I mean, these old consoles are great if you have the old TV set up, if you know how to set them up, if you still have all the wiring and the power supplies and all that stuff. But the 2600 Plus seems like a good, viable option for people who want to kind of go back and relive it, especially the Atari 7800. Like Mr. Postal just said there, he's got the 7800, which I have behind me. I have it in one of these cubby holes here, actually. Right there, actually. Right there, right there. It's a great console, and the fact that the 2600 Plus can pretty much play the 7800 games, that almost sold me to want to buy one. So far, I haven't. Not sure if I'm going to, because I still have all these old consoles that still work. One thought was to, buy it so I don't have to use the old consoles, but at the same time, if you don't use them, they fall apart anyways, right? Like, so just as a backup plan, but and they keep making firmware updates. So Polestyle, he likes his 2600. Yeah, well, yeah, he says he likes using his. He's got a 2600 plus as well, and they keep pushing out the updates. Like the Atari puts out the updates for it to make more games work with it. Because I heard in the beginning there was a bunch of 7800 games that didn't work. There was some 2600 games that didn't work, and what are you gonna do, right? The other thing I'm more excited about is Mr. Run and Jump and what can come out afterwards. If they made this, hopefully that means they're going to start making more, and we'll see where they go from here. Because, Atari's not done. they got they got a lot more to go, and of course, Audacity Games is still doing some stuff, and maybe we'll start seeing other companies come out with some interesting new stuff for the Atari 2600 now that the 2600 Plus. The main thing is, I hope that more young people start getting into it. Intelligence first for me, a Fairchild Channel F, then, oh, nice. So you had a Fairchild. Yeah, I was wondering if anybody would have anything like that. Because that's getting into the first generation. The Fairchild, the kind of like the first, what was it? The first Odyssey, I guess? Was that what it was called? The one that was like just a square that moved on the screen? And then Fairchild was the first one to come out with the cartridge. The actual removable full-on cartridge that had a game stored on there. Really great piece of video game history. I've never actually tried one. I've never seen one in my life. I've seen them on TV, but I've never actually seen a functioning Fairchild. I don't think anybody that I recall when I grew up had one. So maybe they just weren't popular in my neck of the woods. Maybe nobody had one. I don't know. Never saw them. Although the same thing with the Vectrex. I didn't know anybody that had a Vectrex. I didn't know that thing existed. Got my Run and Jump and Alien Invasion. Yeah, the Alien Invasion. I think that's the Audacity one, right? But yeah, like I didn't know anybody that had a Vectrex. I never even seen that system before. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, it's kind of like a box, like a rectangular box. It had the screen built in, had these two controllers in there, and the games were lines, like vector lines, if you understand what that is, mathematical points. So it was just like black and white lines, and they had these, I think they had like an overlay you could put over the screen, if I'm correct. And yeah, so, and it was all one unit. It had its own sound, its own screen, its own controllers. And if you see them for sale today, they're typically in the $400 or $500 range to buy one of those things. Fairchild, I have no idea myself how much they are. Like I said, I haven't seen any I haven't seen one, but I heard that the controllers are prone to being broken. So, and I think that that's a common thing nowadays. Just like things like the Atari 5200 has a reputation where the controllers don't work. Even like things like these, like the ColecoVision. I remember buying a set of these on eBay. They were selling them untested. This is the what do they call it? The Super Action Controller. And this one works, but the other one, certain directions didn't work. So I tried taking it apart and cleaning it and got nowhere with it. So I'm like, you just never know with these older systems that have these like odd controllers if they're going to work. Of course, we got the Intellivision controller. This is the Intellivision 2. And the cool thing about this was you could swap the thing out, get new controllers. I don't really know if they sold them individually. I'm assuming they did. If they didn't, there was probably an intent to do so. But yeah, there was like, the fact that you can buy a new controller or swap a controller out. You could do it with the old Intellivision as well, the original, I should say. But you had to pull the unit apart. You have to unscrew it, pull it all out. You have to unplug it from the inside. And I've done that. My Intellivision, my older Intellivision that I have. I remember they actually had made third-party controllers for the Intellivision. Interesting. My Intellivision that I was using for the longest time is kind of a Frankenstein of two systems that I had bought and kind of put the parts together to make a good working one. I have some Fairchild cartridges but no system. No Swear Gamer he's got Fairchild cartridges but no system. Actually, that's how I started with my Atari 8-bit. I started off buying the cartridges before I had the system. I had plans to buy one, and I did. I ended up getting one, but I got an Atari 400 to play them, but I couldn't pass up when I saw the cartridges for sale, so I'm like, okay, I'll get the cartridges now, get the system later. But I don't have any Fairchild anything. And those ones look interesting. They kind of look like 8-track tapes, if anybody knows what that is. They're like yellow 8-track looking tape things. I don't know if they're the same size though. I've never seen one. Actually, even at the flea market by my house, I've been going there for years, and there's this one video game booth that's kind of changed hands over the years. In fact, probably about 6 years ago, when I first started going there, that's where I got a lot of my, not most of my Atari games, but a lot of Atari games I got from there. And they also had a few Intellivision games and some Coleco games. And they still have them today, but I pretty much have them all now. So I did see they had some Odyssey in box games. Odyssey 2, I should say. I saw them sitting kind of, it's a kind of a messy place, and I saw them in the back area, but I didn't ask how much they were or anything. I didn't inquire. And the last few times I've been there, I haven't seen them, so I don't know. One of my most obscure old systems I have is the Emerson Arcadia. Oh, I've seen pictures of that, the Arcadia. I don't. That's kind of like an Intellivision or something, right? And it's got like the controller, like the Intellivision with the. Or am I thinking of something else? It has a stick instead of the disc. But yeah, I remember seeing they had the some Odyssey 2 games, which was interesting. I just didn't get around to buying them, and then I don't know what they did with them. I don't know if they got rid of them or whatnot. But yeah, so as I was going back to, my fond memories are Intellivision all the way. As far as my earliest memories. Yeah, I think the Arcadia, I'm thinking now, like, when I go on the Intellivision forums on the Atari Age, the programming forums, I believe programming for that system is the same as programming for the Intellivision. I think it uses the same specs and all that stuff. But yeah, I remember, Donkey Kong was always always held a special place, even though it has such an awful reputation today, of course. And we did rectify that with this, DK Arcade and D2K and all the other ones, of course. There's like a special edition, but, I still hold a special place for the Donkey Kong game, and even Donkey Kong Jr., which, this one I ended up picking up. Oh, look at that, sale price, $9.97. I got Donkey Kong Jr., I remember when I was a kid, for like Christmas, I think it was. It was like my grandparents got it for our Christmas. Donkey Kong was like an Easter gift, And, you know, that was like special times back then. You know, the games weren't 100% the greatest if you want to compare them to their arcade namesakes. But I was so young that it didn't matter to me. Like, yeah, I wished it had more than two boards. Like completing the first two boards over and over again kind of got boring for, you know, after a bit. But, you know, Junior did have a third board, and I really enjoyed this one. I thought what do you call it? The it would just get harder. It would, you know, the intensity of the game. It would ramp up at a nice pace. It didn't go from like not hard to really hard. And so I kind of like the Donkey Kong Jr. the way it was. Um, I know there's a homebrew for this one. I'm not sure why it needed it. I guess maybe it has the fourth board in it. There is that fourth board where it's kind of in Mario's little weird layer where there's like switches and electricity. Maybe that's in there. I know the Immortal John Hancock did a video on it. I don't have that one. I don't have the ROM or anything, so I've not been able to try it. But I believe it is. But I always thought that this was actually a pretty good version. And there's not even a picture on the back. Just a picture of Donkey Kong and Donkey Kong Jr. and a little bit of a tale as to what the game is about. But no picture. But I always thought that this was great. And I played this a lot on my television when I was a kid. And I had no problems with it. Yeah, my friend had the ColecoVision version, and I played it at his house a few times, but I still thought that the Intellivision one was quite special. And of course, those are the memories that you keep, and I think that in the end, people my age or a lot of the people who watch my channel, they like to kind of go back to what they used to play on their systems and when they were kids, and you know, the memories are still there even if the game wasn't the greatest. Like the Nosfera Gamer was talking about the Odyssey 2. You know, I still haven't even got to playing the golf game that I have, but from what I've saw pictures of, it looks like it's pretty much the same as the Atari 2600 Golf, which is very, very questionable. Almost unplayable. But, you know, when you grew up with it, those are the memories that you cherish, and, you know, you keep them going, and the nostalgia of it all. They might not be the greatest games in the world, but you still kind of remember them, and this is what we had when we were kids. This is what we played, and it was fun. But, yeah, so that's all I wanted to talk about today. Of course, some of my memories was visiting friends and family with other systems. My neighbor had an NES, and and I was talking about that earlier. That the idea that everybody on the street in the community, a lot of people had something different, and I remember, you know, I'd go over to this person's house. He had a VIC-20. I went over to this person's house. He had a ColecoVision. I went over to this friend's house. They had an Atari, and then some of us had the same systems. I used to borrow Intellivision games from my brother's friend. I'd like walk all the way over to their house. They had an Intellivision. I'd borrow Intellivision games like Pitfall, and then I would go over to the neighbors beside them, and they had like Commodore 64, and I would borrow games from them, and we would copy games and save games all the time. So yeah, it was always like that. Anyways, I think it's time to wrap this up because I don't know, 50 minutes going in. Anyways, thanks everybody for coming out and giving their thoughts and talking about their first game consoles. Of course, I'd love to continue this in the comments below. When the video is finished, it'll upload to the channel. Feel free to go into the comments section and tell me what video game console you grew up with, what memories you have, the fond memories, the thoughts you have, why you still enjoy the console today. Always want to hear it. It's a great conversation. Throw it down below, and we'll talk to you later.